we are in.
You first. First bang.
Studio. Okay, well, here we are, gone past 7:34. Feel Good Friday. Let's see what we can do about the stories. Joining Kaide Baker and myself, Shopper Martins, in the studio, we have got, yes, Waji, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Shopper. Good morning, good morning, good morning, Kade, good morning, Fidel, and good morning, Lagos.
Yes, yes, yes. And Waji has already introduced Fidel for us. You know to expect like Tunde and Waji for Friday, but I'm kind of loving this new combination. So we'll see. We'll see. Fidel, hopefully we can keep you for a little longer on the show. Okay, so good morning, Fidel. How you doing?
Good morning. Good morning, Lagos.
All right, great to have
Good
you on.
morning. Good
And
to
we've
have you
got
here.
you in the conversation.
That's right. So you can be a part of our talk as always across all platforms, really. On WhatsApp, it's 0809 On Twitter, it's hashtag freshlypressed981. And also we're streaming live, so get your messages there as well. It's youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos.
All right, so let's start off our stories with this one in from the Guardian newspaper. And I have to say, it's kind of depending on what spin you put on it, positive news. NDLEA, the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, seizes 40,250 kilograms of codeine worth 2 billion naira at Lagos port. Now, this was imported in two 40-foot containers from India, and the seizures were apparently made possible with intelligence from foreign partners and the cooperation of other port stakeholders such as Customs, DSS, Navy, and others. And Wachi, I'd love to get your take on this because, as we know from many um, focus pieces on it, that codeine has become a scourge of, especially in certain parts of the country. What do you say to this?
Well, first of all, Shopper, thanks for starting with that point about what is actually causing the rise in importation in these particular illicit drugs. Well, they're not illicit, but the abuse of these particular
Mm,
drugs in particular. Now, my issue is this. In as much as it is a step in the right direction, but I do have quite a bit of questions I need to ask.
okay.
Number one, that these consignments have particular numbers with containers marked with certain indications and everything else. So if you have consignment numbers for these particular containers, then that means that there must be a manifest. If a manifest exists, then that means somebody must have signed that manifest. So my question is, who actually now authorized the shipment of these particular goods and services? That's where we need to go. It's not just about seizing the cargo and saying that we've seized the cargo. We need to
Mm.
indicate that this belongs to person A, B, and C.
Because this was also just from the way that the information came out,
Hmm.
right? It made us realize that there is even more cargo because this was just
Exactly.
the
The
latest.
latest one, there was
So
a previous one as
yeah,
well,
if we
right?
keep hearing news about we've seized this but not knowing what happens next, or
Hmm.
how much further the investigations go,
Right.
I see where you're coming from.
Exactly, and it's about how you manage the narrative because you have to be able to slap handcuffs on somebody's wrist and hold that individual responsible. And that person can claim to the wind that all they're doing is just shipping, but there's a particular reason behind it, especially if it's connected to any kind of cartel business. So that's level number one. Level number two, which is the difficult conversation we do not want to have, which is why do we even have this addiction to begin with? Why are people in the population resorting to this particular scourge, like you mentioned, Shopware? That's something we need to begin to pay very close attention to because the conversation becomes a lot simpler when you now begin to tackle it at its roots, where you eradicate the addiction issues by focusing on the actual causes of it. Then you no longer have this necessitation for importation of these things for people to
Mm.
cope. So the larger conversation should be, why do we have this issue? It's around a lot of things: insecurity, no jobs, people not having a future, infrastructure challenges, the difficulty of Nigeria, happiness index, all these things that you can combine. So the conversation should now be, how do we now begin to address it at the root to give people a sense of purpose every single morning so that you can now begin to reverse the addiction? That is where the real therapy is. How do you get to the understanding of what drives people to those things to begin with? Because when you now begin to reverse the conversation, you move people away from it so you don't have to worry about people importing it. These things are seen by certain cartel individuals as a business, supply and demand. Very simple. That's the only reason why they do it. They're not doing it because there's any other particular need. They're doing it because they're making money. It's very, very, very simple for them. So the
Mm.
question is now being, if you now eradicate the demand, for this particular thing, then the people doing business are not going to patronize in it. It's really just that simple. That's the economics of it. So let's now get to the root of why is there a demand to begin with. What social programs are we putting in place? How are we better enabling the environment? How are we now encouraging young people to feel better about themselves so that they don't resort to these particular things? I remember back in the day, mixing codeine with all sorts. It's not anything new. This is going back into the mid '90s, and I remember when people used to do it. There was a song that UGK Underground Kings came up with, "Sipping on Some Scissor." I don't know if people remember that, but it's a known thing. So my point is, we have to be able to eradicate it so that people do not feel that this should become a part of their lives on a daily basis.
All right, thank you very much for that. Let's move on to our next story. This one comes to you for that. It's from the Premium Times. It talks about insurgency. So 1.4 million Nigerian children under 5 to suffer acute malnutrition. Now, this, let me just put a context to this. So nearly 1.4 million children under the age of 5 in the northeast in Nigeria are expected to suffer from acute malnutrition in the coming years as a result of the ongoing insurgency crisis by non-state armed groups. And this is according to the United Nations Officer for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. What do you make of this?
I don't think they're saying anything that is new. These are products of either war or anarchy or unrest, right? There's groups who are acting, non-state actors, right? Now, when these people are tussling, we find that there's going to be a sort of like a farming, because the people who cannot access their businesses, there are people who cannot access their farms and whatnot. So it is only normal that eventually there will be starvation, eventually there will be sickness and whatnot. So this report, to me, it's sort of expected. It's something we should know. The only unfortunate thing is when we get to hear from our security personnel, from the government, that Boko Haram, ISWAP, banditry is going to be is sort of technically stopped technically. So when we hear these reports, and then when we have foreign organizations or people from other states or from other regions starting to tell us that this is going to happen, it's kind of a contradiction.
They're saying that they need 1.1, at least the UN is saying that Nigeria needs about $1.1 billion in donation for urgent assistance for over 5.5 million people in 2022. Is that possible? Do we see that happening? I mean, even if we do get this intervention, is it possible that it would likely put an end to all that's happening?
I'm not confident. I doubt that, because we've seen what we've seen what has happened with interventions in the past. I'm kind of like I use antecedents to judge predictions. Okay, so when we do have these resources, would they be properly applied? Would they be sent to the right people, or will it enter somebody else's pockets? It's scary, if you ask me. It's scary, but I believe we need to look inwards, right? The money from outside will, if it comes, if it doesn't come. But first, we need to solve the problem inwards before we worry about, or before we start to seek for funds outside.
All right, thank you very much for that, Peter. We've got messages up on our WhatsApp platform, 0809 444
Yemi from Marina says, Yemi's talking about a story that is going to come out later, saying, please allow me to say that in saner climes, irrespective of who's getting queried for the importation of bad gas, certain people ought to have resigned for proper investigation of what went wrong. I also bought adulterated fuel, but luckily for me, my car is still running. My engine goes off from time to time, and my fuel gauge goes haywire. But as soon as I start the car, we are good to go. Oh, well, you never know. There might just be, you might just get your
Take a closer look.
And please also see if you can get it checked out. We've got this one in. D from Alausa says, Your analyst says handcuffs should be put on someone's wrist. Corruption, it should be put on the culprit's hands. Enough of wrongful arrears in Nigeria.
Well,
I like that.
Okay.
all right.
And Dr. I from CMS says codeine is a drug prescribed world over and it's not illegal. It's sold in pharmacy. So when you report that they seized a container, why was it seized? This drug is sold legally here. So is this not a PR stunt? But then there's a difference between codeine that is brought in or manufactured here in the country or brought in for legal purposes, and there is paperwork that will be able to
And you see,
go
that
with
is a fantastic point, and not to take away from what the comment made, because the comment is a valid question. There's nothing illegal about it, but
No.
then the question is now who is importing it and for what purpose.
Yes.
And if you go to the manifest will be clear, because it has to be people within the medical pharmacy community
Exactly.
that has to now make that importation. And a random individual can't just
And remember,
import 40 kilograms of codeine.
yes,
Yes.
and
I mean,
codeine
come
is
on.
not an over-the-counter drug.
It's
It's something
not
that needs a
being
prescription.
prescribed. Yeah, so it's a valid point that the person who made a comment made, but then that's what now leads to the questions of who are the people shipping, buying, selling,
Which
and
is
everything
what
else.
exactly what you said, the paperwork.
The paperwork,
See the
man.
signatures.
Follow the money trail.
All right, Wadi, the next story comes to you. Talks about Boko Haram. Still over 30,000 Boko Haram and ISWAP terrorists have surrendered. This is according to Governor Zulum. It's from the Premium Times. Okay, we just talked about, millions of people being displaced in a certain part of Nigeria. Now 30,000 people have surrendered. So the question is, what happens after this?
Okay, let me just first and foremost state, Zulum is one of my favorites. I actually enjoy him a lot. The governor's doing amazing things because for me, he captures the essence of leadership as perception in the way that he handles the narratives and the way that he communicates and engages. So he's recently come out to indicate that 30,000 Boko Haram ISWAP terrorists have surrendered. And what I like in this particular article is that he further went on to say that there's a big difference between those who have surrendered and those who have been captured.
Okay.
You understand? And then he also talked about the Geneva Convention and the rules of engagement and the way that different parties are treated and everything else. So for those that are being surrendered, there's also a mention of how best do you now rehabilitate them and reintegrate them back into society. There are local governments in Borno State that have been abandoned as a result of this. The question now becomes how do we, and I think it's something that Zulum talked about a couple of weeks ago, where he talked about receiving funding to be able to now create these communities again, engage individuals economically and everything else. So he seems to have a very good plan, and he seems to have a very good understanding of how to handle these situations, which are you cannot fight these things full out from a military position. You have to also be diplomatic. You also have to look at the economic and environmental circumstances. You also have to look at the family and to a great extent the religious components as well. Excuse me, because all these things
They're tied into
they're
each other.
tied into each other. Thank you
Real
very much,
quick,
Gary.
I want to just ask this question real quick. So is there going to be some type of prosecution? Because let's not make any mistakes. Some crimes have been perpetrated.
Mhm.
So now there are insurgents, and there's some that's been captured, there's some that's surrendered.
Right.
So is there going to be some type of prosecution at some point in time?
Well, it's a legal conversation at that point. And to the point that Zuna made, which I alluded to just very quickly, was that there is a different way in which you handle individuals who have surrendered versus those that have been captured. So those that have been surrendered, I would assume have some leeway. They would be obviously, I'm guessing, maybe appointed like some kind of legal representation to be able to now maneuver with regards to what they can and cannot get away with. So to your point, I don't think they'll get away scot-free and just walk away into the wind. I think they'll
Because
be...
there's no cash. They also mentioned that there are no promissory notes amongst other things.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, but just to answer your question
Yes.
about will there be some prosecution, I would like to assume that something will happen.
I hope so.
Will it be to the level that the individuals have been captured? Probably not.
If I could just weigh in there. So we often assume that the fact that someone is found guilty in court means the person is going to go to prison.
Okay.
It doesn't always follow. So there should be some prosecution, and these men should be found guilty. But however, they could be given pardons. They could be given what's it called now? A sort of
Amnesty.
not even amnesty per se, but community service. Okay, allow them to do some work, allow them to get busy, and then eventually, this is while the integration process is going on, because there must be data that these guys are capable of these things. It can't just be cleaned off. This isn't salvation here.
All right, thank you so much for that.
So we've got messages coming in on WhatsApp. You can also use the hashtag FreshlyPress981 on Twitter, or you can leave a comment, which I see you've been doing up on youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos.
This one says 30,000 program fighters. If 30,000 fighters are surrendering, how many are out there? This number is
That's a good point. That's a good point.
we're
That's
in
the
trouble
question.
Very worrisome.
that we have ever imagined.
No, but this 30,000 is over a period of time. So it's been going on for quite a few years. It's not like a single capture that they went and found a battalion of 30,000 Pokemon fighters. So let's be clear on that.
Okay, yeah, thank you for making that point, Waji. All right, so let's take a look at this next article coming in from This Day newspaper. Nigeria seeks ILO's assistance to tackle poverty and unemployment. Now, this is the International Labor Organization, and Nigeria has urged this organization to develop a more radical programs that will help tackle the rising incidence of poverty and social disruptions in Nigeria. So we heard from the Minister of Labor and Employment, Senator Chris Ngige, who said, and I quote, "There is a scourge of massive unemployment and underemployment. So far, the intervention of the ILO in this direction is like a drop of water in the ocean. We need the organization to assist and mobilize donor agencies so that we can effectively tackle this." So, Fidel, I'd love to get your take on this because as you read through the story, of course, the minister, by the way, this was in his address to while he was receiving a delegation of the France candidate for the office of Secretary General of the ILO, Muriel Pennicode, who came to request for Nigeria's support in the election. And he then said all of that. So what's your take on this?
I mean, it's always good when you have foreign representatives coming to ask for something, you ask for something back, And in this case, it's the labor minister making these requests. But we must understand that when we talk about employment, there is mass unemployment. It means that there's a lot of people who are willing to work and who don't have the work, and then there are people who, how would I say, have no work because the work is there and they don't have the skills, right? So I think there is a large space where we have our people suffering from a brain drain. So now when we have people who are suffering from a brain drain, we find out that there is going to be jobs and then there is not people who can fill these positions. So in my opinion, I feel like there needs to be development, and the minister here, especially when it comes to talking about our doctors, and there's a lot of things we know that we're expecting from him. Okay,
I mean, if we're even looking at what the minister right now, when you hear Ngige, your people currently are thinking about the ASU strike. Are they not? Which goes back to this issue of people in employment already who are saying they might as well be unemployed because they're not receiving wages, they're not receiving benefits, all of that happening.
I mean, look, with ASU, it's a bit pathetic because I mean we've been here over and over again, and I hope for shame's sake and to save face, our government will sit and decide that, okay, we want to put an end to this thing, especially now that maybe we have bargaining power with politicking coming up in 2023.
With timing is everything. But when you talk about brain drain, there are factors that cause that, right? Anyway, we've got more stories for you, and of course we've got your messages coming in, so make sure you send in your analysis of the stories as well, because that's what we're here for, to get your take as well as to give you our analyst take.
Okay, so let's move on to our next story. This one comes to you, Archie. It talks about police officers and others feared killed as armed robbers attack bullion van, and this from the Premium Times. So they're saying, according to the story, 6 persons, including 2 police officers, have allegedly lost their lives as armed robbers attacked a bullion van at Idiape area of in Ibadan, Oyo State. Now, I saw videos I've been seeing videos, generally different videos of circulating on social media, majorly on WhatsApp. But what do you make of the story?
As always, when these things happen and lives are lost, it's a shameful thing. And then when you now begin to think of the reasons why that is happening, it also becomes a lot more shameful because obviously, the perpetrators of this crime must have had information, tracked down the bullying van, staged an attack, and then killing people in the process. And we have to get to a point where, you ask yourself what happens or what are the reasons why people resort to such fatalistic approaches just to get money and to kill innocent people in the process. Going back to what I've been talking about larger symptomatic issues, it's where we are in the country at the moment. It's where we've got to because it's now creating a situation where the movement of money becomes a dangerous affair. So are we now going to literally have tanks and battalions escorting bullion vans from one area to another? Or do we become a lot more cashless and we have a less reliance on
Paper money.
paper money, so that way everything is just done electronically? Because if this is going to be the cost of moving money, then it's something that highly needs to be reevaluated. I mean, who wants to drive a bullion van, regardless of how trained or how bad you think you are, if you're some kind of like Marine Commando DEFCON 1 type individual, but you want to go out there just driving a bullion van and then escorting a bullion van, and then is going to get shot up by AK-47s and other automatic assault rifles? And do you want to be the individual who just happens to be in the area and then caught up in the crossfire? I mean, who wants to deal with that? So because I mean, if we have to read in this kind of story, if I see a bullion van on the street, I'm going in the opposite direction because I don't know who's coming out. I don't know what's going to happen. So these are just kind of things we really need to begin to ask ourselves: is what do we do to alleviate the situation? We could always talk about ramping up security. We can always talk about all these things, but for God's sake, until we begin to change the attitudes of the challenges that we have in Nigeria, the bullion vans will just be a target for people to get money.
And it goes back to some what you said earlier on about having to look at everything holistically, right? What are the causes? What are the causes and the underlying reasons behind this?
Yeah.
My goodness.
I mean, they're long. I mean, it's a 6-hour show. If you want to unpack that question.
No, we've only got 10 minutes, 12 minutes left. Let's move on from the Punch newspaper. This is still on about money, but this time foreign exchange. CBN to stop sale of forex to banks by December. Now, according to the CBN governor, Godwin Emefiele, banks must begin to source their forex from export proceeds. Hence, the need to support non-oil exporters in the country. Now, he made this known at a press briefing on the launch of the bank's new forex repatriation scheme, RT200, which stands for Race to $200 billion. Now, that's a set of policies, plans, and programs for non-oil exports that would enable the country to generate this $200 billion in forex repatriation exclusively from non-oil exports over the next 3 to 5 years. All right, so I would really love to get your take on this, Fidel, because I don't.
I mean, I'm sure, like the bank MDs are just rolling their eyes, like, okay, let's see, because I mean, look, the CBN governor, I must comment. I'm one of his fans. Okay, I must commend his intention to try to save the naira.
But yeah, I see a look on your face, but Fidel, we'll see where you go with
it. You said fan and you said intentions.
Yeah. So I mean, the policies. Look, the policies don't always scale through, and I think it's a Nigerian factor. Okay. So the CBN governor is here trying to ensure that non-oil exports are pushed there. There's a sensitization, and then reduce the reliance on crude. Now, the thing is this: a lot of produce in Nigeria was sustaining our economy before crude oil. Crude oil has spoiled the Nigerian economy, made us lazy, if I may use that phrase. And if we don't go back to the drawing board, and start finding how our cashew nuts, our cassava, our cocoa, if we don't start pushing these things out, we're going to see where other players from the international market are going to come and start taking these things and then taking it out and bringing the finished products back to us. We already see it, to be honest. And there is the average man can't finance these things. So they have to bring in, the banks have to, the banks don't. They need to be on board. They need to be on board. I know.
Now, here's the okay, Waji, you want to go?
No. Fidel, thank you so much for saying that. And I think these are the conversations we refuse to have. I just want to point something out
Okay.
to the point, to Fidel's remarks. There was a report in 1961 that talked about industrialization in Nigeria, and this point had nothing to do with oil. And it had stated then that at the rate that we were growing industrially with all these things that have to do with non-oil, you talk about cassava, cashew, you talk about palm kernels, our textile industry, and all these things in 1961, that if we had continued on the trajectory we were on, we would have become an industrialized nation in 25 years. That was 1986. That was the plan in 1961. Guess what crippled that? Two things: the worst combination you can ever have on the planet: oil and corruption.
Yeah. Real
Look-
quick, though, let's get to our messages because of our time. 0809-444-0981. This one here says, last week the Ministry of Justice wanted 500 million to try Boko Haram members. I hope these 30,000 would be prosecuted and jailed. If not, this is just to the fight against terrorism.
All right, and we've got this one in from Otunuga, who says the most unfortunate thing about the robbery of the bullion van at Ibadan, the police commissioner kept saying on television yesterday that one of her men was shot in the leg. Meanwhile, video circulating on social media showed at least one dead policeman. Why can't government officials at all levels speak the truth, at least for once, says Otunuga.
Nikavelu comes in to say, I'm sorry, was the itinerary of the bullion van made public? Why can't why can't they be stealth about their movements? World over, there are specific requirements for bullion vans, not these makeshift pickups we're using, and that's why we keep saying that police needs training and retraining. The solution to this crime lies between the bank and the police. They
Agreed.
must turn up the heat to smoke out these people, basically. All right, so let's get to the next story real quick. This one comes to you, Wachi, and generally it's
Okay, so Nigeria, from the Guardian newspaper, industry risks collapse as aviation fuel hits 400 naira per liter.
yes. Okay, so to put a context to this, generally it went from 190 to about 400. This was between last year, over 100% increase. But what do you think about this, Wachi?
I mean, it is what it is, and it's I just feel like I'm sounding like a broken record because I keep going back to the root cause of the issue. We are here because we do not refine jet fuel. End of story. And we keep having to import it. And when you keep having to import it, you're going to be subjected to the dollar fluctuation, which is going to have a knock-on effect on price of the importation of jet fuel. Once you now have that increase that goes from 190 to 400 to 500 in terms of the per liter value for jet fuel, it's going to have a knock-on effect on the price that people pay to buy tickets. When you now have a sharp increase within a year period of price tickets for domestic travel, you're going to have a reduction in the amount of people that travel because they just can't afford it. When you have a reduction in the revenue that you're gaining from passenger travel, the knock-on services that you cannot begin to attain, like aviation bridges to now connect passenger airlines to the terminals and all these things, they all now begin to go down. So the functioning question is twofold. One is, how do we get to the root cause of it? We need to, as an oil producing nation, begin to refine jet fuel. Number two, in the event that we cannot do it, I am sorry I have to say this, but I must say it because aviation is a critical sector, then the federal government, like other governments, need to step in and subsidize. Okay? I'm not a fan of subsidy.
Oh, that's a
No.
word.
But let
for
me
people.
be very clear what I mean by subsidize. What I mean by subsidize is that the government need to review their taxes that they levy on these airlines. That's what I mean by subsidize. Not giving money, but by removing some of these ridiculous landing charges that they have, ridiculous taxes. You have about 6 aviation related industries, from FAN to NACO to this one to that one, charging fees. It's ridiculous. And when you now begin to think about it, those things come up to about 21% of the surcharges. It doesn't make any sense. So the government needs to reevaluate their revenue making mentality when it comes to agencies, because that's what they begin to do. Because Chuck, you see it all the time. They come out, Carrie, you see it all the time. They come out and say, oh, FAN declares revenues of this amount. Excuse me? What does that even mean?
And I think it's also goes back to agencies across the board. When did we have our agencies just become these revenue generating machines?
And why do we have so many?
Questions. And what a question to end the show on. I would like to take some of your messages now. Up on WhatsApp, Damilola Olawi says the CBN wants banks to source forex from an unproductive economy that is ravaged by insecurity, inadequate infrastructure, pervasive corruption, and serious competition from other serious, far-thinking economies. I'd like to see how this would is supposed to work. And he also says, P.S. China is planning to be the next cocoa superpower.
Look at that.
Think about that. Okay. We've got more messages now, and Cisco, yes, that video is quite, it's unfortunate.
Disturbing.
Yes. And that is that. Thank you so much to our two analysts, Fidel and Waji Waji. Oh my goodness, today things were happening.
Someone tweeted and said, "Is it just me or Waji sounds a little like Mr. C?"
I don't see it.
I don't think so.
I don't
Mr.
see
C.
it.
I do.
You do?
You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
Well,
All right.
I've known Mr. C over 30 years, so it doesn't. Yeah, oh yeah,
Oh,
we go way
okay.
back. So that's
All
probably
right.
why. Yeah.
All right.
But thank you. That is a compliment.
All right, so make sure you catch our analysts up on across social media platforms. Where can we find you both?
You can find me at the Corporate MC, That's corporate with a K, across
Okay.
all social media platforms.
And Fidel.
And you can find me on Twitter as IZOTNE Izotene on Twitter.
Okay.
Nice.
And that is that. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Freshly Pressed. Keep it tuned at 10 past 8. We have got Lagos Talks coming your way.
Oh,
Wow. I'm going to this thing. I say yes. Waji sounds. Well, you can keep calling you Waji. Like Waji the singer.
someone said what?
Again, Waji. Yes, Waji sounds like Mr. C.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if these things happen, yeah, the naira will go up. I know the naira will go up. The economy, but it's not the CBN's government's
still
job
streaming
to
live.
save other areas.
We're
Do
still
you get?
streaming live.
Oh, okay.
That's how I feel. You know.
Excuse me.
It's not. But it's also not the CBN's job to completely destabilize positive business.